Hello, everyone, and welcome to our December holiday edition of First Fridays with Urban Farms. First Fridays is a monthly live YouTube broadcast where we showcase the Urban Farms Initiative at Services for the Underserved. For those who don't know me, I'm Mike Hollis, the Urban Farms Director, and I'm excited to have you joining us today. Because we're live, anything can happen, so if we do experience any technical issues during the broadcast, just bear with us as we get things running smoothly again. It also means that you can interact through the live chat. So if you are signed into YouTube, use the live chat feature to ask questions, make a comment, or give a shout out to the SUS Urban Farms team. And there we go. We can actually see a comment from Judith, and I believe during the pre-show we saw a comment from Alexis. So definitely feel free to use that feature to participate in the show. With colder weather arriving to New York City, Urban Farms is now in our off-season. But that doesn't mean that we've stopped working in our gardens. We continue to grow some hardier crops, we prune dormant plants, and we tackle a lot of other winter garden activities. For today's first segment, we're actually headed into the garden with Urban Farms manager Dan Danza to get all of the details on an important piece of our year-round garden tasks, composting.
Hey everybody, this is Dan, Urban Farms Manager, behind the camera, and we're going to talk a little bit about compost today. And we're looking at our 3-bin composting system at Marcy Hart, and this is something that can continue throughout the year. I would note that compost is it's a microbial process, so it generates heat. And it also needs heat to kind of keep going, so it does slow down over the winter. So now to have a good, effective compost pile, what it all comes down to is basically a combination of what we call greens and browns. Greens are the ingredients that you add to your pile that are high in nitrogen. Browns are the ingredients that you add to your pile that are high in carbon. And you want a kind of 2-to-1 ratio of green to brown, and that is key to a balanced pile. So, what are greens? What do we include in that category? Greens include most of your kitchen, vegetable kitchen scraps. They include things like grass clippings. Coffee grinds are also considered a green, and although they are not actually green, they are very high in nitrogen. Browns include things like your dried leaves. They include hay, which we don't have too much of here, but is a pretty common component. And they also include things like paper and cardboard. You can have some of that in your compost. 2 other main ingredients: water. You don't want too much water, but in a handful of good composting material, you want to be able to wring out a drop of water. So when it gets warm and dry in the summer, sometimes you want to make sure that the pile is being moistened, maybe once or twice a week, depending on the weather. It also needs air. Bacteria needs air to work. So you need to aerate the compost by turning it, which we use our spading fork for, or you could also use a shovel. So we'll turn it pretty much weekly throughout the prime composting season as well. Now, this specific system, the 3-bin system, gives us certain advantages over just having one single compost pile. What does it allow you to do? Well, it allows you to have a continuous cycle of composting. So you have 3 compost piles, all in kind of different stages of doneness, that are being continually managed and cycled through a process. We move from left to right, so this would be the 1st bin, 2nd bin, 3rd bin. The 1st bin is the pile that is, that's where you start. The final bin is what we call the finishing pile. That's where the compost goes to kind of cool off and finish for a few weeks. So the process is pretty basic. You fill up your 1st bin, and you'll see this has, there's some kitchen scraps in here. Some folks from the building put in kitchen scraps. We have all of our grass clippings from when we mow the lawn. We have lots of dried leaves now this time of year. That all goes in there, and once that's decomposed, it goes into the 2nd bin, And then you can start that process again in the first bin. And after a few weeks, the stuff from the second bin goes into the last one, and after another few weeks, you have finished compost. And that's pretty much what we do. I would use that to mulch around our trees and shrubs, which I'm going to do today. If I wanted to put it in a one of our raised beds, for instance, I would sift it using this stuff is just chicken wire. Then it can go right into the raised beds, and we've done that here at Marcy a number of times. So what I'm going to do now is actually start that process over again. I've got a little bit of brown material in the bottom of the second bin. That's going to help keep the aeration consistent. And I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to take my shovel, I'm going to pull out these slats. So as you can see, when we built this, we have these removable slats, which allows us to shovel a little more easily. And I'm just going to start that process over again. I have some mixed green and brown material here, and we're going to get going. And that's the basics of our 3-bin compost system here at Marcy Hart Farm. So stay safe, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Dan. Composting is a beautiful opportunity to transform our food and garden waste into a valuable resource that makes for healthier soils at all of our gardens. Alexis is asking, is compost widely done in New York City? And in my opinion, not widely enough. So a lot of community gardens do have composting that they do on site. There had pre-COVID been collection points throughout the city for organics, and the city had actually started working on a brown bin system to collect food scraps and compost at some central locations. There are some amazing organizations that are still collecting food scraps and composting on behalf of the city's residents. One of them is actually an organization that we've partnered with in the past at SUS Urban Farms. Big Reuse does an amazing job in collecting food scraps from communities in Queens and in northern Brooklyn, and turning that into some wonderful fertilizer that gets used at community gardens, including at some of SUS's urban farms. While Urban Farms most often operates in outdoor spaces, winter is also a time for us to focus on indoor projects, from trying new product recipes to holding educational workshops, to planning and preparing for next spring. For today's second segment, we'll be celebrating the wonderful team of urban farmers that work throughout the year at one of our flagship urban farms in East New York, Brooklyn. December's Urban Farmer Spotlight shines on Rhonda Bell, Walter Feature, Yvonne Creighton, Missy Spellman, and Milton Smith, our Urban Farms team at Dewitt. Thank you to all of our urban farmers at Dewitt. Very good question from Ines in that she's asking what vegetables can be planted in the winter time that will resist kind of the cold temperatures and some of the frost. And it can be a challenge to start a lot of plants in the winter. But if you do have some cold weather crops like cabbage, kale, collards, a lot of members of the mustard family, that are growing earlier in the fall, they can survive a lot of initial frosts. And those are also some plants that you can start indoors. So if it's something that you don't necessarily have growing quite yet, you can actually start it from seed indoors and keep it going and possibly even put it in outdoors in early spring. And a wonderful message from Adina and I believe from Lorraine as well. So thank you both for your comment. Another wonderful thing that can be grown in the winter are herbs. I actually have some rosemary growing indoors at the moment. I have some aloe in the window that I'm growing. So lots of different herbs that can be done indoors year-round and can also survive some cooler weather if you have a fire escape that once the plants are established, you can put them on, or a windowsill, or even an outdoor space like we have at our urban farms. Thank you as well to all of the other tenants at Dewitt that support our urban farmers at Dewitt by volunteering in the garden and attending urban farms activities. While this winter's programming does look a little bit different due to COVID, we still have been very excited to keep our urban farmers engaged through digital projects and online community activities. In fact, on that note, I'm excited for you to join me in today's final segment, which is a holiday edition for our 5-minute workshop. So, as you saw, urban farmer Missy Spellman at Dewitt does some incredible holiday decorating for residents, and that's true for a number of our urban farmers throughout the city. I was actually working with urban farmer Valerie Standback. Oh, and I'm seeing that Ines is mentioning, Diana is saying that she had chard planted in the summer that's still going. Yeah, and chard is an excellent one that will definitely survive cooler weather. I believe the Swiss chard that we have growing right now is still going strong, and in years past is kind of lasted right up through the end of the year, through Christmas. So very exciting that your garden is still producing this this late into the season. For our workshop today, I had been working with one of our urban farmers that many of you may know, Valerie Standback, in assembling holiday wreaths. So I'm quite excited to actually bring the workshop that we kind of produced together to you today with a little walkthrough on how to create a mini holiday wreath. In terms of materials that you need, wire. So what I'm using is just some galvanized wire that I picked up at a hardware store, one of the big box hardware stores. And I've made it into a ring. So you can see I made it a little sturdier than it otherwise would be by creating a double ring with it and just kind of tying it together up at the top. And then with some other wire. So this is a thinner wire, so a higher gauge wire. I've cut a couple of smaller strips that I will be using to kind of adhere things to this larger ring. When Valerie and I were doing this workshop the other day online, she actually used an old coat hanger, a wire coat hanger that she had gotten from the dry cleaner for her sturdier ring. And then for the ties that will tie the material to the wreath with, she was using some wire that she had, but also some bread ties. So the ties that you'll get on baked goods that kind of seal the plastic shut. That wire is kind of a perfect consistency for this project. Now I've got kind of a big example wreath right here, just to kind of show you beautiful wreath, but on the back, you can see what they're doing when they make the larger wreaths, where they've got the wire and then the wreath itself is just bouquets that are overlapping. So here's one bunch of this lovely pine that's overlapped over here with another bunch. And we are going to be doing the exact same thing with a set of herbs that I've collected. So I mentioned some of that rosemary that's growing. We also have some thyme, some oregano, some sage, and then some mint. And then in the back here is a really exciting one. This one is huazalte. It's a Mexican herb that's not quite so common, but I actually found it at my local supermarket. So I was really excited to see it and definitely grabbed it for the sake of showing how to incorporate that into a wreath. Two ways you can go about it. One is wrapping. So if I've got kind of a bunch of sage right here, I can take this and just do kind of a couple of circles with it around the wire. And then with some of the smaller wire, kind of tie that off to keep it on to the wreath circle. And then as I go around, you'll see down at the end, you've got the leaves over here, just starting a wreath. Down at the end, you've got the point sticking out. So the next bunch I do is going to overlap with that point just to cover it. So if I take the next bunch and kind of continue that process of just wrapping the wire around to keep it adhered, then it'll start to hide the points at which it's adhering to the wreath itself. Now, the second option you could have is to actually create a little mini bouquet. And for that, you can take something like this right here. I break off one of the ends a little bit just to create some size. I'm going to go ahead and add some of the oregano to make a bit more of a bouquet, maybe some of the mint as well. So whereas previously we were just kind of taking the individual strands and then adhering them into the circle by wrapping it around, here what I can do is just attach the entire bouquet and have it kind of stick out at a bit of an angle to give the wreath a little more depth and a little bit more interest. So kind of the same thing down at the end here. Take the wire, just wrap that around a couple of times until I've got it stuck onto my wreath. And you can see it's starting to come together. And I'm just going to kind of continue this process all the way around. And through the magic of YouTube Live here, we're going to take a look at a final version of this herb wreath. But you can see that even though it was produced a little bit before the show started today, it's using that exact technique. So we've got the bouquet up at the top that's kind of sticking out a bit. We have all of the herbs down below that are wrapped. And taking a look at the back, you can see it's just overlapping with the preceding set of herbs all the way through. For some color, stuck some cranberries in there. So if you have cranberries, you can either just punch them right onto the wire or just kind of wrap them into the bouquet of herbs itself. Herbs overall won't last all that long in an indoor setting. Of course, they will likely wilt over the course of a day, but this is kind of a lovely project if you've got anything you want to do that's just going to create a really nice aroma for dinner or for your holiday itself. Putting this outdoors will last a lot longer in the colder weather. And using other materials, also going to create, oh yes, absolutely. So you've got decoration for sure, but the fragrance is lovely. Yeah, this room right now is smelling beautiful with all of the different herbs I'm playing with. Oh, and we're seeing some clapping from the central office. Very nice that and very exciting that we've got an audience um, uh, for us over at Central. So hello to the central office. Lots of other materials you can use. So I'm using herbs just because as Urban Farms, we love doing things out of edible ingredients. But of course, using pine, if you've got a Christmas tree, like I do, you might have clipped some of the bottom branches and can absolutely use that to make a wreath. Holly, even just different scraps that you're finding in gardens or outdoors. So I've seen some beautiful wreaths that are just made out of twigs, and if you've got enough dimension to it and enough in terms of different materials, different textures, different colors, really can't go wrong. Yeah, I did want to kind of give credit to Valerie Standback in that her and I were able to kind of workshop this workshop a little bit the other day, and she had some beautiful ideas in terms of materials that she would use and techniques that she would use. But if you do make your own wreaths at any point, definitely let me know. I'd be really excited to see what you're able to come up with and what materials you use. If you enjoyed this short workshop, definitely check out any of the other videos on our YouTube channel. The Urban Farms team has a wonderful collection of cooking tutorials, educational gardening videos, farm tours, and more for you to check out. So before we conclude this holiday edition of our First Fridays broadcast, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of longtime urban farmer John Patty last month. John was an enthusiastic and dedicated member of the SUS community, and the Urban Farms team is incredibly grateful for his passionate work and the many valued memories we have of working alongside him. Thank you, John, for your kindness, for your camaraderie, and for your friendship throughout the years. And as we wrap up our last First Fridays broadcast for the year, I want to thank you all for joining us and for your continued interest and support for SUS and the Urban Farms Initiative. I wish you a safe and enjoyable holiday season, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the new year.